On a crisp spring morning in a quiet, tree-lined suburban neighborhood, where sunlight dripped lazily through maple leaves and the air smelled faintly of lilacs and fresh grass, a small girl named Lila skipped out of her family's cream-colored home, her feet bare, hair in loose curls, and mischief sparkling in her eyes like dewdrops catching sunbeams. Lila was only 7 but had the spirit of 100 sunrises inside her, and today, she was determined to make something special out of nothing, as only children can. Clutched in her hand was a pink plastic flower she had plucked from her toy basket, which she believed could grant magic if waved properly. Across the street, in a weathered brick house with green shutters and a garden full of gnomes and forget-me-nots, lived Mrs. Dottie Hargrove, an elderly woman in her late 70s who was once a schoolteacher, a swing dancer, and the neighborhood's most feared bingo champion. Dottie had a peculiar love for red blazers and pearls, and today, like most days, she was up early sweeping the walkway with a long, straw broom that had bristles like fraying fireworks. She had never married, never moved, and never learned how to rest. Most children avoided her, afraid of her loud voice and sharper eyebrows, but Lila saw something magical in her, a silent rebellion against growing old. Lila tiptoed over and waved her flower wand dramatically. "You're the queen now," she declared, "and I'm your sidekick." Dottie, startled at first, looked down at the girl and then, after a pause, grinned with a crooked smile that hadn't surfaced in years. "A queen, eh?" she chuckled. "Well, then I decreed a parade." Without another word, she handed the broom to Lila, grabbed a sun hat from her porch, and together they marched down the street, one with a broom, the other waving an invisible flag, their shadows dancing beside them. It was an odd sight, an elderly woman in pearls, walking briskly beside a barefoot child, both pretending they were leading troops to battle or unicorns to pasture, depending on whose turn it was to tell the story. Their laughter bubbled down the street and stirred curtains and windows. The mailman paused to smile, and a golden retriever barked joyfully from a lawn, as if saluting them. They stopped by a tall oak tree, where Dottie tapped the trunk and claimed it was a portal to the kingdom of lost socks. Lila gasped, believing every word. She knelt, digging in the dirt with her fingers, and unearthed a small coin, which Dottie told her was a wish token, lost by an elf on his way to laundry day. The two then began collecting leaves, rocks, and twigs, calling them ingredients for an invisibility potion that would keep the kingdom safe from laundry dragons. By mid-morning, they had recruited 2 other neighborhood kids, twins named Milo and Annie, who arrived on scooters and were promptly knighted with garden hoses and dubbed the Water Watchers. Dottie gave everyone chores. One would find the sacred chalk, used to draw shields on the sidewalk. Another would fetch grape juice, the elixir of strength, and someone had to watch the skies for dragon clouds. As their giggles turned louder, a neighbor complained. Mrs. Bonner, the HOA president, peeked from behind her curtains and muttered, "What nonsense is this?" before dialing the local patrol to investigate disturbance and public disorder involving a broom and 4 children. Soon, a police car pulled up quietly. Dottie and the kids froze mid-charge. She had just been teaching them how to gallop like llamas when the car arrived. The officer stepped out, confused by the scene before him, an elderly woman holding her hands in the air like antlers and children spinning in circles around her. "Ma'am, is everything all right?" he asked, puzzled. Dottie, always sharp, placed a hand on her hip and replied, "We're on a critical mission to save the kingdom, officer. Do you want to join?" The officer, unable to stifle a laugh, radioed in that everything was fine and ended up helping them build a shield out of cardboard boxes. Lila beamed. The adventure had just become real. The rest of the day was a montage of creativity and wild storytelling. Lila and Dottie turned a puddle into a mermaid trap, convinced Milo that ants were secret spies, and used sidewalk chalk to draw a massive map of the enchanted realm. Dottie's red blazer became her royal robe, and her broom transformed into the scepter of sweeping justice. But beyond the laughter and fantasy, something deeper bloomed. Dottie hadn't smiled so much in years, and Lila had never felt so free. That day, they didn't just play. They created a world, a sacred one, where generations merged not in memory but in magic. It wasn't just suburban fun. It was a rebellion against boredom, loneliness, and the tyranny of grown-up seriousness. As the sun dipped low, painting the sky in tangerine and lavender, Dottie and Lila sat on the curb, catching their breath. "You know," said Dottie, "you've got the heart of an explorer." Lila nodded. "And you've got the soul of a dragon queen." They smiled at each other, the kind of smile that erases years and creates bridges. Lila's parents called her home for dinner, and Dottie returned to her porch, broom in hand. But from that day forward, the quiet street was never quite the same. The parade had begun. The following day, Dottie stood in front of her porch, looking out across the neighborhood with a contented smile. Her pearl necklace gleamed in the morning sunlight, and the red blazer that had become her trademark was a bit more vibrant than it had ever been. She had grown used to the quiet life, the kind that was marked by predictable rhythms of dusting and sweeping. But now, there was a new energy within her, a spark of joy that she hadn't felt in years. Lila, still full of enthusiasm, dashed up to her door with a new adventure in mind. "Grandma Dottie, I think we need a quest today," she declared, her little hands clutching a rolled-up map, scribbled over with crayon and half-formed lines. "A real one?" "Oh, a real one?" Dottie asked with a raised eyebrow. She pulled up her sleeves, ready to entertain whatever new fantasy Lila was concocting. "What kind of quest?" "We need to find the lost treasure of Fiddler Creek," Lila said with all the authority a 7-year-old could muster. "I think it's hidden in the old oak tree." Dottie raised her eyebrows. "Fiddler Creek? That's not a real place, Lila." Lila shrugged. "Doesn't matter. We can make it real." With that, they set off down the street again. This time, they weren't alone. Dottie's small crew had grown overnight. Milo, Annie, and their friend Calvin, who was notorious for wearing mismatched socks and playing pranks on his classmates, all joined in the fun. It didn't take long before they were all gathered at the old oak tree, the same one where Dottie had previously tapped for magic coins. "All right, kids," Dottie said, assuming a position of authority as they all huddled together. "The treasure is hidden somewhere beneath this mighty oak, and we have to follow the rules." "Rules?" Calvin piped up, skeptical. "What rules?" "First rule," Dottie said, holding up a finger. "No arguing." "Second rule," she continued. "Every treasure hunter must be brave, even if there's a dragon guarding the treasure." "Third rule," asked Lila, wide-eyed with excitement. "We have to believe that the treasure is real," Dottie said, looking straight into Lila's eyes. "Because if we don't believe, then we won't find it. This is the secret, my dear." The children nodded eagerly, all caught up in the spell of Dottie's wisdom. Together, they began their search. They pulled at roots, dug through soil with sticks, and examined every crack in the bark of the tree. They hunted high and low, and Dottie, never one to shy away from adventure, joined in the digging with equal fervor. For hours, the search seemed fruitless, and the sun began to dip lower in the sky. But just as they were ready to give up, Lila's small voice broke the silence. "I found it," she cried, her face lighting up with triumph. Beneath a pile of scattered leaves, Lila had uncovered a small, wooden chest, painted gold, albeit faded with time. Dottie's heart skipped a beat. "No way," she whispered, bending down to examine it. The children crowded around, eyes wide with disbelief. They slowly lifted the chest from the earth, its surface rough and cracked from age. Inside, there was no glittering treasure, no shiny jewels or piles of gold. Instead, there were scraps of parchment, some with faded writing, others with odd drawings, and a small, worn-out compass. Lila looked up at Dottie with a quizzical expression. "Is this the treasure, Grandma Dottie?" she asked. Dottie's lips curved into a knowing smile. "Oh, it's the treasure, all right." She reached down and picked up the compass. "This belonged to my father. He was a sailor, and he always said that a compass like this would guide us to our dreams." Lila's eyes widened in understanding. "So this is the real treasure? Not jewels, but something even more valuable." Dottie nodded. "That's right, dear. Sometimes the real treasures are the memories we carry with us, and they're hidden in places we least expect. It doesn't matter if we find gold or riches. What matters is the adventure itself. The children gathered around, amazed at the wisdom Dottie shared. Their quest, which had begun as a wild fantasy, had led them to something far more meaningful. A reminder that the true treasures in life aren't always shiny or new. They're the experiences we share with others, the stories we create together, and the bonds we form. As the golden hour of sunset bathed the neighborhood in warmth, Dottie and the children sat under the oak tree. Tired but happy, they passed around the compass, each child taking turns holding it, as if it carried the weight of every cherished memory they had made that day. "I'll keep this safe," Lila said, clutching the compass in her small hands. "It's my treasure." Dottie looked at her with a deep, loving gaze. "It's ours, Lila. It always will be." As they walked back to their homes, the sun sank behind the houses, casting long shadows across the sidewalk. It had been a day filled with wonder, laughter, and unexpected magic. And in that quiet suburban neighborhood, where life often seemed predictable and routine, a new kind of adventure had begun, a timeless one, rooted in friendship, exploration, and the belief that anything was possible as long as they were together.